Welcome to our latest video, How Risk Management Fails. In this session, we are going to talk about why risk management breaks down in practice and how you can spot the early warning signs. Some of the biggest organisational failures didn't come from a risk that nobody saw coming. They came from risks that were already known, but weren't owned and weren't being managed. Someone flagged them, but no one acted. That's the quiet failure of risk management, and it's more common than you think. So let's look at the patterns that show up again and again when risk management fails. What do we see in organisations? Firstly, we see complacency and overconfidence. We've always done it this way. That won't happen to us. These are classic cultural warning signs. And I'm sure we can all think about when we've heard that being mentioned in organisations. It's when risk tolerance becomes recklessness, or when success breeds a false sense of security. Secondly, risk silos and poor communication mean that we've not fully explored interdependencies and cascading impacts. Risk data often stays within one department. It doesn't get shared across systems and creates blind spots. Finance knows the cost. Ops see the vulnerability, but they're not talking to each other. They're not sharing this information. And so the organisation continues to be exposed to that risk. Thirdly, red flags get ignored. If we think about the Lehman Brothers collapse, and there's lots of examples or lots of videos that have talked about that time, the signs of collapse were visible, but were downplayed and minimised or lost in the noise of everything else that was happening in the market. This happens when an organisation doesn't have a culture of listening, escalation, or learning from near misses. Another idea is around incomplete or outdated risk registers. Risk registers are great if you keep them up to date. If you've written a load of stuff on a risk register and then it's filed away, it's tracked on an Excel spreadsheet or in a risk management software, but it's not real-time, relevant and reviewed, then you might as well not bother writing anything down in the first place. When they become static documents or just a tick box, we've captured all our risks, you're not managing risk and you're not protecting the organisation. The final example is around leadership denial or lack of sponsorship. If leaders don't actively sponsor risk initiatives, or worse, dismiss them, it sends a clear message. Risk isn't urgent. Risk isn't my problem. And risk isn't welcome. When leadership doesn't own risk, the rest of the organisation follows suit. We need a culture where risk is embraced, where people are thinking about how risk can help them to manage the organisation and help them to do their jobs, and are not afraid to share risks that they identify. Let's look at another financial system outage and a financial example. Let's take a closer look at the TSB Bank's IT migration, which happened in 2018. This wasn't a failure of technology, it was a failure of risk management. There was poor vendor oversight, with unclear roles and accountabilities between TSB and the contractor that was working for them. The testing of this migration was incomplete or rushed, and known risks were not escalated. And the other element that led to this becoming such a bigger event is that when things started to go wrong, there wasn't a clear plan for containment or communication. They weren't prepared for that failure. The result? Millions of customers were locked out of their accounts. There was significant brand damage, regulatory scrutiny, tens of millions in compensation, and significant regulatory fines. This wasn't just a technical glitch. It was a culture and governance issue. The risk was known, but it wasn't integrated, it wasn't shared, and it wasn't being managed. Risk management doesn't just fail when something unexpected happens. It fails when known risks aren't communicated, escalated, or acted on. It fails when some risk is someone else's problem. So think about your own organisation. Is risk managed? Are people aware of risks, but no one's owning them? Is there a process to follow through on risk management? In the next video, we'll talk about how we can apply these lessons and think about some next steps to follow.